Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of RunYogi Diaries. This is your host, Santosh Shiva. Over the last 2 years, I've had the privilege of talking to some amazing people, day-to-day people, who are on an extraordinary journey of well-being through endurance sports. I hope you took some possibility back into your lives, took some action, and maybe some inspiration to perspire. If you're on this channel for the first time today, please do consider subscribing to it. Leave your comments if you think you took something away or you had some thoughts about today's conversation. And remember to like the video if you liked it. Excited to have Tarun Chandrasekhar in the house today. Tarun and Polly Niravath, who was in the episode 102, are husband-wife duo and who I call the triathlon couple. It's one thing to pursue your own passion, but it's another thing to have both of you do it. Take something. This episode is going to be fun. So do dig in and check out what's behind the scenes on how Tarun does it and how Tarun and Polly have, as a couple, managed to live a extremely active lifestyle. Let's get in. Hey Tarun, welcome to RunYogi Diaries.
Hi, thanks, Santosh. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure. And, before we get into the weeds of it, I have to tell everyone how I actually connected with you. So I was volunteering at the Ironman Texas in Woodlands, Houston Woodlands, earlier this summer. And in a sea of people, I couldn't miss one other Indian guy doing the Ironman. I was like, hey, I gotta talk to this guy because there were like maybe three people, three Indians. One of it was my dear friend Ram, who was doing it. So I was there to support him, and then I saw you run by, and then found you on the finishers list and got in touch with you. So congratulations on the Ironman, by the way.
Thank you, and I'm glad you got in touch with me. I followed up some of your Run Yogi Diary podcasts after that, and I was actually quite impressed because I really did not know beforehand. So it's pretty good work you do here. Yeah.
Thanks, Tarun. So pretty stoked to have you. You're a executive in the tech industry, pretty busy. Your work keeps you on the roads quite a bit.
Sure.
And you are married to Polly, who was on the podcast last week.
Yeah.
Husband, father, and busy professional, and then also an endurance sports athlete. So pretty active, hectic lifestyle you have there. You've been doing this for almost 10 years now. Started
Yeah.
with cycling, pivoted into running, and then king of all endurance, Ironman. So we want to get into all of that. You live in Houston, Texas, of course.
Yeah.
Did I catch everything?
Oh yeah, that's about it. I think exactly. I've been a cyclist at heart for most of my life, if not, and most of my endurance entry into endurance sports was cycling.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much spot on.
Okay, terrific. All right, so here we are to kind of dig a little bit more and get behind the scenes on, how and why you do what you do. So maybe we'll do a bit of a flashback. And so, how did it all start? Why did you get into endurance sports?
Let's see. So I grew up in India. I grew up in Delhi, right? And most of, I think, 80s and 90s, just like all the other kids, played a lot of soccer, played a lot of cricket, badminton. Nobody was thinking of sports as something to do, right? It was just what you
Yeah,
did. You had fun. I rode bikes with my friends, and so every Saturday, Sunday morning, you couldn't wake up to go to school. You'll barely make the bus of Monday through Friday. But Saturday, Sunday, I'll be up at 5 a.m. with my friends to go ride my bikes to the park and go play there. No
yeah, yeah,
problems doing that, right? And so did that most of my life. Everybody we all pined to buy a BSA SLR back then. That was the big
yeah.
bike that you wanted, and I don't think I never got one by the end of it, but moved to the US about year 2000 for my master's. And
Mm,
I think, like all kids in India, till about ninth, 10th grade, you are fairly active, right? Then
mm,
you start wondering about, hey, am I going to
mm.
go
Yeah.
into what am I going to study, right? And like my kids always joke, Indians can have any career as long as it's an engineer, lawyer, or a doctor. Those are only three
Yeah.
choices they get. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so everybody was serious. So we got into studying, and you start gaining weight. Then, I mean, if you really
Mm,
think about it,
mm,
right, you really
mm,
lose the endurance, which is what I did too. Ended
mm,
up in college here. Master's program was a revolution for me because it gave me a lot of free time. The
mm,
whole it's 8 to 5, right? 5 o'clock you're
mm,
free. Saturday, Sunday you're free. It's not like the
mm.
9 to 9, which college
Yeah.
in India used to be. So it gave me a lot of free time. I had a little $50 Walmart mountain bike that I used to ride everywhere. Played a lot of
Mm,
racquetball, badminton. Just got into a little bit of level of fitness, and then
mm.
actually, interestingly, I think my first foray into this was probably hiking. That's when I met a bunch of
Okay.
classmates and friends, and we would go hike places, camp places. And then 2002, after I graduated, I went to move to California, Southern California. And
Mm,
about, I think, 2 or 3 months later, I met Polly, my wife now, on a hike.
mm.
So we were up
Oh,
in
okay.
the yeah, we were up in the Sierra Nevada. So there was through some a common group of friends that she also joined, and then we
Mm.
hiked. We started
Nice.
talking, and then basically we started going on every weekend. We would be out hiking, whether it's Death Valley, it's Joshua Tree, it's Grand Canyon, it's Yosemite. So
Yeah.
nice, beautiful, big hikes. You don't have kids, you're not married. It's pretty easy to go out every
Yeah.
weekend, right?
Yeah. And
And
the
that's
romance is in the air, right?
exactly right. It was
Even if you weren't a hiker, you would have gone there on.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. But we actually both naturally liked it, and I'll tell you,
Mhm.
like you saw Polly, right? She's 100
Yeah.
pounds
Mm,
wet, and she, when I first met her, she would be carrying a 45 pound backpack and
mm,
hiking with us for multiple days. So it was a very, I was very impressed, by the way. But so that's what we did through all of California, and then when
mm.
we moved to Houston for Polly's residency, we were very disappointed because there were no mountains. There was just literally nothing to do
Yeah.
here, right? But
Yeah.
that's kind of when I took up cycling, mostly because there were a lot of
Mm.
these 100-mile rides that happen here. A lot of foundation. There was Tour de Pink was one of the first ones, which was for breast cancer, and
Right.
because
Right.
Polly is a breast cancer doctor, we were like, hey, we could go join this, and so I did that ride. Did not know how to. There's so much you don't know. You naturally know
Yeah.
how to ride a bike, just
Yeah.
like you naturally know how to run. But that's different from trying to go run a marathon just because you can run,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same way with cycling. So my first few rides were like that, and over the years, I learned how to cycle better, right? And then I
Yeah.
started actually learning. There's a really good. I think 2011 was my first, and then 2012 I signed up for the MS 150, and
Okay.
which is a great bike ride. I don't know if you guys know this, right? It's a 2 day ride from Houston to
Yeah.
Austin. It's
I've
what it
done it.
used
Yeah.
to be, right? So
I've done the
now,
MS 150 here as well in Memphis, Tennessee when I used to live there.
oh,
So did it
that's a
my
fun ride too, yeah.
yeah.
So I did that every year after that, but they have a training program here in
Mhm.
Houston, which is the Ready to Roll, which starts from January and goes through April. So I signed up with those guys year on year, and that's when I truly started learning about endurance sports in terms of how do you
Mm.
worry about nutrition, how do you worry about hydration, and how do you slowly build up the cadence. Still
Yeah.
didn't have a training program per se. Basically, Tuesdays and Thursdays I would play racquetball or badminton, and then
Mm.
Saturday I would go and do a big ride. That was my
Mm.
training program for the first 3 4 years, and I don't think I made much progress in terms of getting better. And a
Mm.
lot of what I also realized that I would lose weight January to April, and I would gain weight all the way back from April to December all the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I had realized, and I was heavier too. I was about 40 pounds heavier back then. And then about
Mm.
2015, 26, 2014, 15, I really realized, look, I want to use this as a
Mm.
mechanism to stay fit, stay healthy. I'm a type 1 diabetic. So one of the
Oh.
goals that I talked to my doctor was that I want to reduce the amount of insulin I take.
Mm.
And so, because I had realized that every time I was on this cycling program, my insulin intake was less, my
Okay.
weight was less, and then the minute I would get off of it, my weight would go up, my insulin intake would go up, and we were like, okay.
Mm.
So then I started saying, okay, I'm done April, then I'm going to put a another bike ride in October, which was the bike around the bay that happens in Galveston. So I started doing two of
Mhm.
them, And meanwhile, Polly got into running, and she got
Mm,
into running big time. She did 5Ks, 10Ks, and I am not a runner.
mm,
I don't get a runner's high. I still don't get a runner's high. I'm not somebody who ever enjoyed running, and so I would always say that's something I'll never do. And she
mm.
did her first
That's
half
what
marathon.
most cyclists say that, right?
That's exactly what we say. Right? So you just don't want to do that. But the one thing that I was jealous of Polly was that, man, it didn't take much to get going.
Mm,
You know, you want to
mm.
get out of the house, you put on a pair of shoes and you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Cycling means you got to fill air, you got to lube the bike, you got to get your helmet on, your clothes on, your
And
food. There's a lot of
yeah,
paraphernalia.
the worst thing about cycling is you got to learn how to fix a flat.
You
That's the
got to
worst
learn
thing.
how to fix a flat tire as well. It's not easy, and 100 other things that could go
Yeah,
wrong at that
yeah,
time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it was, and so that was there. But um, I think it started cycling probably started running started for me because there was a conference I went to in San Diego for work,
Mm,
and
mm.
they had a 5K there.
Okay.
Okay, and they were like, okay, and I was like, fine, 5K shouldn't be hard. I couldn't run a mile because the problem I would do is I had one pace, and that's the pace I
Mm,
run, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
I run a 5K, which is 3.2 miles, right? I'm 3.1 mile. I'm running out. I run a mile, and then I walk the rest because I was really bad at it. And I'm seeing all these other people who are older than me just kind of doing this, and that's kind of when I was talking to Polly, and she was talking about how she had switched to this heart rate based training method. The idea
Mm,
being,
mm,
you don't just run at one flat pace and you tire yourself out and then you got nothing left, right? So you learn
yeah.
slow, you learn how to run slow, and you run. And that's what I did. I did run walks for a while. I did like 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, 3 minute run, 1 minute walk, 10 minute. And I got to a stage where I slowly realized that it's actually okay. I was still
Mm.
not getting a runner's high, but I was able to build the aerobic capacity to go run a 5K without having to stop.
So
You
do you
know,
get a high when you cycle?
oh yeah, every
Hmm?
freaking night. It could be 105 degrees with 40-mile-an-hour winds, and I'll still be very happy when I come back home. Right? It's just
Ah,
intrinsic
nice.
to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just.
yeah, yeah,
I think we're just built differently, my wife and I, because she would love every run, no
yeah,
matter
yeah,
what, right? And I
yeah,
love every bike ride. I went out today after a month after my shoulder surgery. 30 miles I went out. It was great. Easy ride. Come
yeah.
back. Super happy. So
Yeah, I have
yeah.
a buddy of mine who he's a great endurance athlete. He's a cyclist. He lives in Denver. Sriram is his name. He's been on the podcast. One of my first guests, who was one of
Hmm.
the ones who trusted me with the podcast. Uh, so he's the same. He's such a fantastic cyclist, and I once went with him to a ride in the Denver area,
Yeah.
and it was the mountains, and he
Yeah.
just zipped past, and I
So,
was struggling to just keep up,
uh,
not falling off. I'm not
yeah.
kidding. I was
Yeah.
struggling to just stay straight, and this guy was like just going ahead. So I can see that, right? I mean, you guys who are so good at cycling, and he's not someone who's like he just like you. He runs, but the high comes from the cycle.
Yeah, that's exactly right for me. And it was, I also got into Garmin at that point from a technology
Mm,
perspective. That was my first Garmin watches. And I really appreciated the training plans they had. That was my
mm,
introduction to training plans outside of what I was doing
mm,
with Ready to Roll. It was structured, saying, okay. And that changed my entire outlook, frankly, for
mm,
running.
mm,
Because then I
mm,
was able to say, I'm going to run a half marathon. And
mm.
this is the date I'm going to run it. And it backfilled everything for me,
Yeah,
and it became okay, today's a 30-minute run, and
yeah,
it's zone 2 heart rate for so much time, and it's a spike of zone 3 or whatever it is, and I
yeah.
just followed it blindly.
Mm,
And
mm,
that's how I ran my first half, and it worked out really well because a running is also the fastest way to lose weight, right? Because compared to
mm,
cycling, and what had happened for me cycling, I probably that's not true. First year of cycling, I lost a lot of weight, right? But
mm,
then
mm, mm.
if you do the same exercise every time, your muscles get very
Yeah,
efficient. You're not going to
less
have the
stress.
same calorie. Yeah, you're not going to get the same
Mm,
calorie loss, right? Or
yeah,
so
yeah,
calorie burn. So, which is why people cross train. So
yeah,
when I started running, I got this immense value of, hey, I can actually keep my weight down easier,
mm,
and that was
yeah.
very important to me.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and the other thing with running, I guess, versus cycling. I mean, not that, especially running versus cycling, is because your machine is your body, and
yeah,
in the cycle, there's a bit of a compensation you can get
correct.
if you're not careful. So one thing I do want to before we move forward, right? I want to zoom in a little bit about the type 1 diabetes
Sure.
you talked about, right?
Yeah.
So there may be folks who are listening to this who may be dealing with something similar. So what do you have to do differently,
Sure.
as someone with type 1 to
Yeah.
be able to do these kind of
Yeah.
activities?
So just high level, right? But that difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is type 2 diabetes is usually happens after the age of 40, where what happens is you've been normal and your sensitivity to the insulin goes down, which means you
Mm-hmm.
have insulin, your body makes it, but which is when exercise helps a lot and really helps a lot. Type 1 diabetes is when one day your pancreas stops working. It's an autoimmune disease. It just completely stops, which means you have to supplement with insulin. So
Mm-hmm.
I took insulin shots, and then I switched to an insulin pump. So it's just a constant pump that just stays in my pocket and is connected to my body and continuously feeds me a drip, right?
Okay.
Now, with what happens with exercise is because you are burning through a lot of it. So this is a constant drip. So you
Mm.
can get very low blood sugar very quickly if you're not careful, and then you can faint and you can crash, or you can. So
Okay.
there's that
Okay.
complication that can happen, right? Or if you're eating too much, then your sugar will go high. So you have to kind of modulate this, what your pancreas does normally through a pump or through insulin to say, okay,
Okay.
I'm going to go out for a 45-minute work and it's sprint work, right? Or it's threshold
Mm.
run versus an easy run. So I will change the amount of insulin I'm going to take based on that, or I would have taken an hour before. So that's the dialing, and a lot of it you kind of have to learn on your own, unfortunately,
Mm.
because A, your body reacts differently to exercise
Mm.
and to
Mm.
insulin, right?
Mm.
And B, it takes a lot of it's not simple equation. It's not like, okay, if I'm going to go for 30 minutes, you take this. You kind of start out with a baseline, and then you have to
Mhm.
keep adjusting that based on. So I've become good at it over the years based on that. I
Okay.
know now what I eat and how much is going to make it spike, and what do I.
Mm.
So usually I would, when I'm doing long rides and long runs, sometimes I won't take the pump. I'll just take no insulin on me. So I'll just leave it here. I can disconnect it, leave it home, run without, knowing that my sugar is not going to drop. It's only, so that way it'll just stay up, and that's fine. But that was there. And then the second thing you realize is that, okay, when you're eating, how much is short term energy gain that you get from
Mm.
simple carbs like, goo gels and things like that? How much do you have complex which you're going to last through the day? And how do you plan that out? There's a fair amount of work people have done in this space, but it took a while to get that dialed in
Mm.
right?
Wow.
And then, yeah,
So it's so you so much have to be in tune with your own physiology, right? I mean,
you
unlike
really do.
unlike it's like the pancreas working is an auto, it works
It's
automatically. And
automatic,
here,
exactly. Yeah,
right here, you
yeah,
really have to be dialed into how your body works. That's amazing. And in a way, I guess it also helps you because you understand how
so
metabolism
much more.
works,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
also smarter about it, I guess.
Yeah,
Unlike
my doctor's very happy, right? Because they don't have to explain it to me because I've been experimenting with it so
yeah,
much now that I
yeah,
know
yeah,
more about my thing mostly because of this. It was
yeah.
also easy because I was cycling first and running. Because in my
Mm,
opinion, if you just start out as a runner with type 1 diabetes, you have to pay more attention early.
mm,
Because, like to your point that you were coming back to earlier, right? Your entire body is your machine, right? So
mm,
you're burning more per calorie on a run versus
mm,
cycle, and
mm,
so the spikes are sharper in the
mhm.
run. The spikes are more delayed or softer in the cycling. It's not that you won't have it. Again, it's also because when you cycle, like, okay, when we cycle, we all grew up, like I said, in India. We don't
Yep.
necessarily realize and don't try to build in that I'm going to have a threshold bike ride, which means I'm going to
Mm,
be basically at the peak of my functional threshold power, and I'm going to
mm,
push hard. We just kind of
mm.
push a gear and we kind of walk around, right? So it's just like the versus a casual run versus a very focused sprint interval
Yep.
versus, and that thing in cycling, it took me longer to switch
Mm.
over to that model, to really
Got
use
it.
that as a training method.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Terrific. So, coming back, so you started running, and now running is a part of your life, and so you're running and you're bicycling, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you seem to have pivoted into the world of triathlons. How did that happen?
That was, again, I just blame my wife for everything. But so I started doing that, and that's when Polly was like, "Hey, okay." She had done a few marathons, and then I had followed her after that. And I think by the time I got into marathons, she had dipped her toe into triathlons. Just
Mm.
sprint, and basically both of us are not very good swimmers, frankly. Okay, both of us. I couldn't at that point. I couldn't swim 25 meters across the pool. So that was for
Mm.
me. Triathlons
Mm.
were a strict no go. I was like, that is never happening for me, 100%. Completely. I told Molly she's crazy, but I did switch to duathlons because I like the
Mm.
idea of multi-sport, right?
Mhm.
So as she was training for triathlon, I was like, okay, I'm training anyway. I'm training for biking and I'm training for running, and I'm
Mhm.
let's do what this run bike run thing is. And then I did a couple of duathlons, and I was like, this is fun.
Mhm.
And this is also like maybe just before COVID and around COVID, the Ironman released a VR app for virtual racing, right?
Mhm.
And they would allow, so you could just sign up and you could just do your own VRs, which were run bike runs or swim bike runs if you wanted to swim, which I
Mhm.
didn't. So I would do a bunch of those, just part of the training program, go do that every weekend, and then you'd get like a virtual badge and you stuff like that. So that's all I was
Mhm.
doing. But as Polly started getting better, she realized that she needed a coach and she needed a swim coach.
Mhm.
And when she went to the swim coach, that's when she realized that the reason we can't swim 25 meters across the pool is because of technique.
Yeah.
See, run is a natural form. We all know how to
Mhm.
walk, we know how to run. Bike is half technique, half
Mhm.
instinct, especially because
Mhm.
we learn to ride a bike when we were kids.
Right.
But swim is 100% technique. It
Yeah.
is, it is everything to do with, hey, are my legs sinking? What's my
Mhm.
breathing like? What's my catch? What's my pull? Everything is technique. And if you're never taught that, you're just
Mhm.
going to adapt your own way. And you're just, so I still, when I started, I would probably swim like this with so much
Mhm.
resistance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went to a coach and I was able to at least get it up to here. I'm still not at a horizontal point,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at a point where I could do that. And so that was very good for me because once I did that, I was like, okay, that means I can go. So in a
Mhm.
pool, I could swim half an hour, I could swim an hour, which
Mhm.
meant I could
Mhm.
actually cover the distance of a half Ironman inside the pool.
Mhm.
By then, Polly had attempted her first Ironman in 19, which she missed the cutoff for the bike with
Mhm.
4 minutes, right? So then I was like, all right, let me see if I can sign up for a half because
Mhm.
because it would force me because I tend to use these events and I just go sign up for something because it
Right.
forced me to overcome my fear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I want to be able to swim in deep water. I had never done that.
Mhm.
I could swim in the pool. If I'm tired, I can stand up, right? In deep
Yeah.
water, it's like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to force the issue and I'm going to train for it. And I started training I signed up, I think January 2020, I decided I'm going to do this. I signed up with a program called TriDot, which is for triathlon
Mhm.
training. I like that program. It's very data driven. They use
Okay.
predictive analytics and then every day I would get 7 days a week. There is no rest days. There are only recovery
Mhm.
days, which are swim or easy bike or easy run. And I would just do whatever was the prescribed thing on the day. So it became religious for me because it was like I wake up, I know I have something to do today. It's a hour
Mhm.
long run, hour long bike, hour long swim, or bike and run today, and you just go execute that. You don't worry about
Mhm.
what you're doing. And everybody told me on that group saying, don't worry about October, which is what I signed up for Waco half Ironman,
Mhm.
just keep doing what you're doing. And that's
Mhm.
what I did. Still didn't go into deep water, focused only on improving my swimming in the pool, but at least got to by about June, July, I got to the point where I was able to do a full half Ironman distance in the pool. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, by July, I'm going to start going to the lake and start practicing this. And in
Mhm.
July, they deferred the Ironman because of
Ah.
COVID. They were like, hey, we're going to cancel that. And we're like, okay, score. I don't have to worry about deep water. What we will do is I will just do a DIY. So Polly and I were both had signed up. So we said we're going to do
Mhm.
our own half Ironman in October, and we'll just do the swim in the pool. So
Mhm.
I deferred that so just did that, and that worked out well. We did it was hot, October 24th, I think 2020 was super hot here in Houston. So finished the half Ironman. I think it took about 6 hours to finish it, five and
Mhm.
a half, 6 hours, something like that. And then we came back, and then as Polly was already scheduled for April 2020 for Ironman Texas.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then meanwhile, every January we did the Chevron Marathon. After that, we were like, okay, I think I'm going to do a full Ironman now. Because even though I
Wow.
had only done a DIY, and the full Ironman, the first available was Indiana in October, in Muncie, Indiana. They used to have 70.3. They doubled it, the course, and they said
Mhm.
that's your
Mhm.
full Ironman. So I was like,
Mhm.
all right, I'm going to sign up for it again, mostly
Yeah.
because that's the only way to force the issue to
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it worked out. I think May 31st or or sorry, Memorial Day weekend, May of 2021 was my first open water race, which
And
was
and
the
you did this. So I'm assuming you did finally
practice. Yeah.
practice into the open water, right? It's
So
not like
about March, April, I
yeah,
started going to there's a lake in Pearland here, Manville,
yeah,
called Twin Lakes. So
right.
started going there with a wetsuit. So the wetsuit is my
Mm.
safety blanket because you can't drown in a wetsuit, by the way.
Yeah,
You
it's a
cannot
crutch.
physically. Yeah, it's a crutch. But it was great for me. You
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
physically,
It
mentally,
works.
I knew I can never drown in a wetsuit, so I'm okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Frankly, I'll probably be better fine without one too. But that was my
yeah.
crutch, and I stuck to it. And I did that from March through April, May, and then May 31st, I had signed up for the Austin Captex Triathlon. I
Mm,
was an Olympic distance triathlon. It was my first
mm,
open water triathlon, formal one.
mm,
So,
mm,
and I tried it, and it was an experience because the
mm.
thing is, you can train for each sport individually, right? But
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
throw everything together, and this is what I'm going to say. If anybody wants to do them, do a bunch of sprint and Olympic tries before you decide to go do a big
yeah,
one, because
yeah,
it just acclimatizes you. How do you
yeah,
set
yeah.
up transition, right? How do you set up? But nobody told me this, how busy it is in the water. So you
Yes,
get in,
yes.
there are
Yeah,
like
yeah.
3,000 people, right?
The
All of
sardines.
them in the same, like sorry, they're like, so it was like a washing machine.
Yeah, yeah.
I had gotten to the point by swimming by myself that I actually found it very peaceful, and I would enjoy the lake swim, saying, okay, it's calm and quiet, and I can breathe and I can focus on my technique. Because in a 25-meter pool, you hit the wall every time, right? Here I could do
Yeah,
100,
yeah,
200, 500 meters and just focus on, okay, kick sets now. So I'm going to
yeah,
work on improving that. I could do that. But I get in and it's like, oh my God, you're getting kicked and punched the whole
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So,
I did my first Olympic distance last month in Austin.
yeah,
I'd done a sprint last year, and it was it's a smaller sprint, so there wasn't really this
yeah,
much of an. The first Olympic distance I did in Austin this year was a big one. So there were
yeah.
it was like all the hardcore guys are out there, right?
Yeah.
And oh my god, the swimming was amazing. I'm like,
It is
somebody's kicking,
is
somebody
exactly
other is
that.
kicking you.
You're
Yeah.
constant. So that mental, you have
Mm,
to, so I had to calm myself down. So found a kayak, held on to it and said, okay, catch yourself and then go. I mean,
yeah.
you got this. So much of this was just to talk you through it, right? But
Mm,
that's what I love about this too, because every
mm,
time I get into training, there is something new to learn. There's something new to
mm.
conquer,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
keeps you younger, in my opinion. Right at the end
Yeah,
of the day,
absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
the important part there. Yeah,
Yeah, and both physically and mentally. So now I know you have a traveling you have a
yeah,
busy
fair
work
amount of time.
schedule
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
travel quite a bit both nationally and internationally. So how did you manage to include these workouts in the middle of all of that?
That's a tough call. And COVID helped a little bit, right, in 2020 because
Mm,
travel had come down a little bit. But even when work actually worked out nicely, especially now that it's hybrid. And so
mm,
I tend to go into work on Mondays and Fridays, which are my swim days, because there's an LA
mm,
Fitness closer to work, so I can swim there first and then get in. So the important part, and I learned this from Polly again, so much I have, but we get our exercise done in the mornings. Most of
mm.
the times, 5 a.m., 5 to 6, you get it done, 5 to 6:30, you're out.
Oh,
So you have the full day available, you feel better. You keep it for the evening, and there's so much. There's kids, and there's work, and there's,
yeah,
the honeydew list that has to be taken care of, something. So
yeah.
always gets in the way. With travel, biking becomes a tough one because you really
Mm,
can't. But I was carrying my swim goggles, sometimes a wetsuit, wherever I
mm,
went. I'd be in Chicago. I'll find an LA Fitness nearby. I would go get my
mm.
training and I'd come back. Runs are the easiest. So a lot of
Yeah.
times, what will happen is if I'm gone for a week or 2 weeks, I would kind of uh, front load my swim and bike before I go in and get a whole volume of that done, so that I'm doing a
Mm,
lot more running during the 2 weeks, and that you
sure.
take that into account. It is tough because when you're with other people, it's really tough to make that time out. So again,
Mm,
it was more of a wake up at 5, just go get it done right before they even wake up and find out that you're gone. And but it's consistency is key. I mean, if you think
Yeah,
about it,
yeah.
you don't need to be. I'm not good at it. I'm not.
Mm,
If I look at how I rate on I'm probably in the bottom third of triathletes most of the times,
mm,
right? So in the age groupers, I'm not good at it. I don't know if I'm going to get better, but consistency is key in just going and trust your training plan, get what you have to go and get it done.
yeah,
You can leave excuses after you're done, not
yeah,
before.
yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
the inertia kicks in,
yeah.
which
No,
is the hard.
totally, totally. No, that makes sense. And so, so you finally ended up doing the Indiana. So how was that?
Yeah,
How was the experience of doing your first Ironman?
man, it was harder than what I thought it would be because you don't
Mm,
realize that, right? You think that okay, I've done a half, and it's going to be twice that, right? But it's a long day, right? It's a
14
really
hours?
long
What?
day.
15
Yeah,
hours?
14 hours. Yeah, it took me 14 hours and 20 minutes, I think, first time around. It was a really long day. It started out well. The
Mm,
swim was a two loop course, and these are the things that you learn on your own, right?
mm,
You realize
mm,
that, oh, I thought I'm going to take it easy. I'm not let the crazy people go first. I will go by
mm,
myself. And it worked out fine for about 20, 30 minutes. But what happens is all the crazy people have already gone the first loop and they came right behind you and they run right over you. So
yeah, yeah.
my goggles got kicked out of my face. I had to grab them before they run away, find a kayak, put the goggles back on, and then continue. And so much of the swim for me that day was just stay calm, right?
Mm,
And then I got out and got on the bike and that's where my sugar was out of whack because I think what happens is that through the whole stress of the swim your stress hormones shoot up, so my blood
mm,
sugar really went high. It took me about
mm,
half an hour on the bike to bring my sugar back under what it should be under normal control.
mm,
And then I
mm,
just stayed on the bike. The bike was hilly but not bad, it was fine. But I
mm.
did feel, so I what again I didn't realize that I had had a crash on the bike maybe 3 weeks before that when
Mm,
I was doing Hotter Than Hell in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is a fun bike
mm,
ride by the way.
mm, mhm.
100 miles and 100-degree Fahrenheit. That's their
Ooh.
yeah. So they were so I'd done that and I had crashed at that point. So basically my wheel hub was a little bit off and I didn't realize it. So it had been rubbing or something. So I was slower than normal, but I
Mm,
got it done. Got on the run. Run is hilly. Run was about 1,200 feet gain in elevation over a marathon, so it wasn't
mm,
bad. But it was like ups and downs and ups and downs and
mhm,
ups and downs.
mhm,
But I knew that it's going to be hilly, so I took it easy and I said, okay, it's basically 6 miles, 6 miles twice, 4 times, right? So each leg
okay.
was 6 miles. So third because it was a 13-mile course twice. So I knew that every 6 miles, like, as long as I can get it done in an hour and a half, that was my
Mm,
goal, and which is what I think I ended up doing about 5 hours for the hilly man. And it was the experience was fun because on the people were awesome. The
mm,
volunteers, right? Like like at IMTX as well, you were one of them. You
mm,
guys were awesome, even in Indiana, because you're bummed, you're struggling at some point.
mm,
Because
mm,
no matter the how positive thoughts you have, you're
mm.
eventually going to run out of everything else, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's just so much of Ironman training, marathons, ultra marathon training is
Mm,
about how much can you suffer
mm,
without quitting. That's all it
mm,
is. It's how
mm,
much can you
mm,
suffer
mm.
without quitting,
Yeah.
and that's important. Now, I was blessed because again, Polly had come with me to Indiana, right? And she was awesome. She had made these posters. I had no idea. She had made these posters,
Mm,
and she would find places on the route where she could drive out to, and then I'll be like deep in the dark by myself, and suddenly I'll see her saying, "Hey, Tarun!" I'm like, "Okay, that's Polly with a poster
nice.
saying." It really made turned that around for me at that point, right? So it was a very good race that way. And then the run, unfortunately, in Indiana because it's hilly, it's in the woods mostly, so
Mm,
not too many spectators, so
okay.
you're just kind of doing this by yourself. But by then, you're 10, 12 hours in. You're like, I'm going to finish
Mm,
this sucker. It's done. Deal. There's no
right,
way I'm
right, right,
stopping now, right?
right,
So
right.
I got it done. But because of that, maybe I didn't feel this big sense of achievement when I finished. I
Mm,
literally finished. I was like, okay, done. Now what? Right? There was not enough emotion. I think I've had more emotion on a 100-mile bike ride than I have
uh,
at the end of this. So that was there, but it was good. I think next couple of days we had fun in Indiana, and then we came back home.
That's
And
kind of ironic, isn't it?
yeah, it was a
It's
little
kind
bit
of
of a
ironic.
letdown. Yeah,
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 for someone who's from an outside in perspective, you've done Ironman. Like, wow, Ironman. I mean, even people who are in endurance sports, but not
yeah,
necessarily triathlons, were probably listening to you and say, "What? You did the Ironman?"
yeah, yeah. But again, if you think about it, right? Even you train for marathons as well.
Mm,
When you're running for a marathon, you're running at 17, 18, 19, 20 miles for multiple weeks.
mm,
The 26-mile is okay. I mean, it's great, right? You're
mm,
putting peak effort, absolutely. But
mm,
at the end of the day, your training volume has more than made it enough that you can make a
mm,
26 miler,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
So I think for me, it was just that you come in, the finish line wasn't like IMTX's. Ironman Texas, by
mm,
the way, the run, and we'll talk about that. That was an awesome race, right?
mm,
That run course has thousands of people waiting. They're constantly
mm,
cheering you. There's
mm.
that hippie hollow course there. There is the finish line is great. Indiana finish line wasn't that great. So you're kind of
Yeah.
like left a little bit
Mm,
behind.
mm, mm.
So I think
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like an ultra run trail finish, right? When you do a
that is,
50 mile in
thank
the
you. That's
middle of the
exactly what
forest.
it is.
I
That's
hear
it.
you. I hear you.
Yeah, it was like an
It's
ultra
not
run
as
trail.
dramatic.
No, it's not as
It's,
dramatic, and you're exhausted by that. So you're like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you're exhausted. There's not much of thing. Okay, fine, I'm done.
yeah. Okay,
Right?
okay, okay.
Exactly. Okay.
It's like when you have those thousands of people saying, "Yeah, Tarun, you did it." It's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
really? I did it?"
Then exactly.
Yeah.
There is like, so IMTX was a much better finish for me. The red
Mm,
carpet is all under lights, and you have people finishing,
mm,
and there's Mike O'Reilly
mm.
there. So it's just special there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's switch to that. So, what happened in the IMTX?
Texas, IMTX
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to race it anyway, right? Because
Oh, really?
I just in October, and I
Yeah.
had not signed up for this. Polly had a deferral from IMTX, so she was going to be
Mm,
there, and I was like, okay, if she's going to be there, and I'm going to be there with her all day anyway,
mm,
maybe I'll
mm.
just sign up. And this is where it happens because when you finish it, you're like, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this again. Check box, bucket list done.
Yeah.
A few weeks in, you're like, you know what? That's when I found that the hub was Stera and the bike. I was like, man, if that was fine, I could have saved half an hour on the bike. I could have done this on the run. So then you're
Sounds
like, I want to
familiar.
do exactly. So they're like, I want to do it again. So signed up again for IMTX, and basically the training never stops. You
Mm,
like
mm,
whether I'm actually, and that's true. Even if I'm not, I don't have a race. I'm not racing. I'm not training to race. Let me
mm,
qualify that,
mm,
right? I'm
mm,
not.
mm,
I am actually scheduling races just as a milestone in my training. The training is
mm,
critical for me because it helps me control my sugar. It helps me control my moods. It just gives me this whole. If you really want it to be a lifestyle change, then it has to be
mm.
on a daily basis, right?
Yep.
And as far as I'm concerned, man, you eat, you poop, you run. That's what you do.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
have
yeah,
to.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
input and
yeah,
output of calories, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
the more you eat, the more you have to exercise and get it out. So
yeah.
that's how I treat it. So I said, fine, if I'm training anyway, I'll put that race on. And that was a fun race. It was a good
Mm,
race. It was windy. The
mm.
bike ride was really windy. I had a flat tire, which lost about half an hour in two flats that I had on the
Whoa.
ride,
Mm,
but still was half an hour faster on the overall race. The 13:45
mm,
this time, which was the 14:20, was good. The run was great. The run was phenomenal. So that was a good course. I liked it.
mm,
Water, not so much. It's a very
mm,
filthy lake. Woodlands is not a nice, pretty lake. The
mm.
Indiana Lake was much better, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of people, so I was excited to go back. So
yeah.
again, as I was struggling in the wind on Hardy Tollway, I was like, this is stupid. You had already done one in October. You didn't have to do this again. Okay. And then 2 days after I finished, I'm like, I lost 30 minutes because of two flat tires. I'm going to
Mm,
sign up again. So I signed up again
mm.
for next year now. So I'm doing it again next
You're
year.
hooked. You're hooked.
That's
You're hooked.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I had I had someone else. I think I had a couple of people who didn't make the cutoff, the cycling
Yeah.
cutoff.
A lot of people didn't
Uh,
make the cutoff this year. It was very bad.
Brutal. Yeah,
It was
yeah,
very brutal. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
But the important part there is that we knew it's very likely to be brutal.
Mm,
So we knew that. And because Polly had suffered this in 2019 when it was bad, so people know.
mhm,
So a lot of my training block here
mm,
was in the wind. It
mm,
was outdoor in the wind. Because usually we train indoors because it's easy, convenient. But
Yeah.
Everything that was over 2 hours was, and I would go out on 521 south out of Sugarland into all the
Mm,
way to Angleton, all the way to Freeport, and it would be 45 miles straight into headwind at
mm,
20, 30 miles an hour, just to suffer so that you mentally prepare yourself because this is how the course is going to be.
right. Right.
So I'd done that enough number of times that when I was like, yep, I knew this is how the course is going to be. And I know
Mm,
it's 20 minutes of hell, and then it's 20 minutes of sweet tailwind, right?
mm,
Twice. And
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, then you go back into it. So you got to mentally prepare yourself. That's the hard part. But again, luckily, because I'm a cyclist,
Yeah.
I've suffered that enough. The
Yeah.
run, had it been hilly, I would have been a much harder problem to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you switch to a TT bike?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
did. So I hey, 2019. I told Polly to buy a TT bike, by the way, and she
Mm,
refused,
mm,
and then she missed the cutoff by 4 minutes. So she came back and
mm.
said, "Fine, I'll buy a TT bike," which is what she did, and it makes a difference. I hate to say it this way. Can you do it without one? You absolutely can, but you're definitely working harder. That's all it is,
I
right?
agree. I agree
Yeah,
because I can
it's
say that from my personal experience this time,
yeah,
the
yeah,
Olympic distance. I have a road bike,
yeah.
and I saw. I mean, I saw that there's distinct advantage to
That's a
speed with a
disadvantage.
TT bike, and people will, especially the hardcore guys, were like zoom,
There's
zoom,
just
zoom.
zip parts, yeah. And the thing is, again, it goes back to, if you really look at it, right? It's not like they are hunched over more. The
Mm,
geometry of the bike is different.
yeah.
Because the road bike, if this is your pedals, this is your seat, and this is your
Mm,
head,
mm,
road bikes, you're sitting like this. On a
mm,
TT bike, the angle is the same, but the seat is much closer to the pedal. So you're actually
mm,
sitting like this. And the minute you
mm,
sit like this, the aerodynamic advantage is you get less area exposed. Right now,
mm,
of course, you could even sit closer, but that your back needs to be really, you need to be really flexible to do that. And because we don't, so that's what made that difference. So you learn over time, but it made a me. But
mm.
again, I started with TT bike 2020 February,
Okay.
and it was almost like learning how to ride again, because
Mm,
again your normal position has changed. You're in where there are no brakes there. The brakes are on the
mm,
base bar.
mm,
So it
mm,
took a little while to get used to stability and everything else. Uh, but once I did, man, it is so fast.
mm.
It's like a diesel engine though. It takes time to get up to speed, and then it will just keep up to speed. It is
Okay.
not as maneuverable as a road bike. So
Mm,
if it really depends, if you have a very curvy course, maybe you're better off on a road bike. If it's going to be like
mm.
more straight lines, which a lot of triathlons are, TT bikes definitely have an advantage.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yeah.
the triathlon bikes have an advantage is you can carry more stuff in there. Like
Mm,
I have a big hydration bladder built into the bike. I have food
mm,
bento box built into the bike. So I can worry about having enough water and food that I don't have to stop for 80 miles.
mm.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Makes
which
sense.
makes it easy. Yeah.
And since you're a biker, what about gravel? Have you ventured into gravel yet?
I have ventured into gravel and I have ventured into mountain. I've been enjoying everything.
Mm.
I haven't done a gravel race yet. I'll be honest with
Okay.
you, but there's a bunch of, mostly I have gravel bikes for when we go camping with the kids and everywhere else.
Mm.
It's easy. It's an all-terrain bike. It's very versatile because you can
Hmm.
ride it on the road,
Yeah.
you can ride it off road, which is comfortable. But and then recently, I actually discovered the Sugarland had a bunch of mountain bike trails that I did not know of
Mm.
before,
Mm.
and so
Mm.
then I got a mountain bike, and I've been just going and exploring those areas just to kind of. But that's a very different sport again.
Yeah.
Techniques are different. I don't know how to do a wheelie, and you kind of have to learn those skill sets to be able to land a bike better and things like that. So
Mm.
again, it's just new stuff to learn. So
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
calendar is full in the stuff I have to learn.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was seeing that there are some long gravel rides in the middle of Texas, Fredericksburg, and
Yes.
things like that. Right?
Yeah.
There are gravel,
Yeah. Races.
routes
Yeah.
and races. Yeah. Great.
Actually, there's even that Wichita Falls one, which I'll be going back to on 24th, which is the Hotter Than Hell. They now
Hmm.
have added a gravel race separate from the road race, so you can just go do that as well. Yeah.
So do you do use the TT bike for these kind of rides or use your road bike?
Uh, I alternate. So
Okay.
I've done head for the so Hotter Than Hell. I've done both on the road bike and the TT bike.
Mm.
MS I've always done on the road bike because there's
Mhm.
10,000 riders. TT
Mm.
bikes are not very rider friendly, you know,
Right.
because if somebody gets too close to you, sudden movements you can't.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Honestly, TT bikes are great for when you don't have the advantage of a peloton, right? Because
Mm.
when you're on a road bike, and if you find a chain gang of 3 or 4 people that you can latch onto, that's fine. You don't
Yeah.
really need to. But bike around the bay, which happens, from Baytown. This is October. They go down to Anahuac, down to Bolivar Peninsula. You take the ferry, cross the ferry with the bike, and then stay in Galveston. Next day morning, come up to Texas City. That one I've done both with road and TT, and I think I prefer the TT bike there because it's always windy. It's like 20 miles an hour
Okay.
winds every time I've done it. So, and there's not enough people doing that race where you can get the advantage of a group. So
Mm.
most of that I'm solo struggling through it. So it makes sense to do that in the TT bike.
Terrific. Awesome. So, what's next? Where are you headed with all this?
What's next? So this season, because I took this time, and I don't know if I mentioned this. I've had this old shoulder injury, which is a frequent dislocation. About 12 years ago, I think it was a karate practice somewhere. I completely popped it out and then
So,
rolled
you're
it
also a
back in.
martial arts guy.
I used to be back in
Used
the
to.
day,
Okay.
not really, and
Okay.
never really went anywhere with it. Just enough, and then
Okay.
I got out. But I popped that shoulder, popped out. I put it back in. Never went to see a doctor, and over the years, it has come out many times. Playing racquetball, playing badminton, something or other, it would pop out. And my
What
one
does that
fear
mean, pop
was
out? Is there no connectivity tissue or anything that holds it
so
together?
think about it, right? It's a ball and socket joint, right? So
Okay.
the bone is in there. Now, what happens if that thing comes out of the socket? It
Okay.
can't go back in. So you really have to force it back. Now, ideally, it
Mm.
shouldn't come out, but because it
Mm.
got kicked first time, it came out, and then over the
Mm.
year, because I never got it fixed, there was a
Mm.
tendon that got in, there was a that got injured. I should have gone to a doctor, and they would have just stitched up the tendon. Problem would have been solved.
Mm.
Never went in because I thought I got it in. I'm good. And then it came out, and then over the years, it became so easy for it to come out because I had eroded the bone. I had
Mm.
broken off chips from my actual socket. That my one fear was I'm going to be in deep open water, and
Mm.
somebody's going to kick me and it's going to pop out. And what's going to happen then? I can't stop and fix it. And that happened at Ironman Texas. 500 yards into the sim, somebody kicks me exactly, then it pops out, and
Oh
I was like,
God.
oh crap. And I was like, fine, just hold on, just go back to
Hold on.
Superman position, and then
Yeah.
brought it back in. And then I was like, okay, and then kind of modified the stroke, finished the swim, and I was like, when I go back, I will find a doctor and go get taken care of this. So
Yeah.
that's what I did right now. So what's next for me this season is just bike rides because I
Okay.
can't swim right now. The surgery is done. Running, I'll get back to. So just bike rides. I have hotter than hell. There is a really awesome ride in Arkansas, Little Rock, called
Mm.
Big Dam Bridge. It goes over
Mm.
this big bridge over the dam that they have, which is 100 miles. I've never done it. I've always wanted to, so I signed up for that. And then January this year, what I'm trying to do is, I would like to volunteer maybe and
Mm.
lead a blind athlete or a disabled athlete maybe in a half
Mm.
or a full distance. So
Nice.
I've reached out to a couple of organizations to see if they have something. Because if I could do that, that's worth it. It's
Yeah.
I always see them. It's the greatest respect for both the guides and the
Yeah.
athletes who do this. Right? It's
Yeah.
just pretty
That'd be
phenomenal.
amazing.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. But my next big race is IMTX again next year.
That's April
Yeah. April 23.
2023.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome, Tarun. I hope your shoulder feels better. So it's basically what the surgery does is get the tendons back, so they grow back, so it stays in place. Is that what they do?
So they had to do a lot more than that this time because I had caused so much damage being the idiot
Mm.
I am. So they had to actually put a bone graft into the humerus to round it off because I had kind of chipped
Mm.
it off. So they had to put a bone graft in. They had to go use some titanium buttons and put some additional bone here and kind of complete off the whole socket because it had kind of worn off here, so it will keep coming off from here. So they had to kind of complete the socket, put some titanium pieces in there, and kind of hold it together fine.
Mm.
So it ended up being fairly major surgery for what could have been just a minor tendon repair back in the
Right.
day. And then they had to reattach some of the tendons to those places so that it's become a little tight now. And it's going to
Okay.
be so a lot of physical therapy in the future before I can swim again. And I may have to modify my swim stroke on the left. My
Mm.
doctor and I are thinking we may not have to, but I'm like, I'm fine doing it as long as it doesn't pop out, is what my concern is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's not like I'm such a great swimmer to begin with. I can easily adapt. I just need to
Yeah.
finish the swim.
Got it. Got it. Terrific. So that's great. I mean, the journey's fun and fascinating, and definitely consistency is a core part of what you've done. And I agree with you that, right. Just surrender to the process, surrender to those programs, and then the rest
Yeah.
of it really takes care of itself. And so, fun Q and A round. I have a fun Q and A round with all my guests as a final part of my conversation. You ready for that?
Sure, let's go.
Let's go for that. Okay, here we go. First thing I want to know from my guest um, is what's your favorite indulgence or junk food? Is there what is that for you?
Chocolate, chocolate.
Chocolate?
I yeah. I eat a lot of food. Okay, so if I
Right.
let me put it this way, let me rephrase. If you're looking at desi chaat, okay,
Hmm.
all kinds of chaat has been my. But if I was to look at it today, probably chocolate is probably my biggest indulgence today.
Okay. Any particular kind of chocolate or
Dark, anything dark chocolate works. Okay.
that's not junk. That's healthy stuff.
Now, man, it's still junk. Trust me, you know, it has 5% health and 95% junk. Okay, compared
Oh,
to
that kind.
1%. Yeah,
Not those bitter ones, right?
yeah, no, 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 just regular good chocolates. Mostly, yeah, chocolates, ice creams, all desserts. I have a
Hmm,
sweet tooth,
hmm,
most
hmm.
definitely.
Nice. Your favorite way to spend a lazy day, other than one of these try activities?
I read quite a bit.
Hmm,
Okay,
hmm,
I would. This just potter around. We're fairly my kids play a lot of music. So my
hmm,
one girl is a drummer, my one girl is a bass guitarist, and then I dabble with the acoustic guitar quite a bit. So I'll go potter
hmm.
around and learn. Goes back to the same thing, self-taught, just kind of keep learning
Nice.
a little bit from there. But yeah, I used to watch a lot of movies and TV before, but it's
Hmm,
almost it's since I started getting serious into training, I've really
hmm.
given up on all TV now. It's something you have to
Yeah,
make room for, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's I think
Something you got
that's
to do.
where it
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What kind of books do you like to read? Any favorite? Anything that inspired you recently?
No, so we go through a lot of them. So
Hmm.
actually there's a really good book, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yes,
It's
yes. I've read that
yeah,
book.
so
Yeah.
I really like that because it translates very well to work and it translates very well
Hmm.
into training.
Yeah.
Because you want to build habits and you really have to layer them. It's like
Yeah.
when people will ask me saying, okay, because I have now 6 years now, successfully managed to keep 40 pounds off of me because
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
I stop thinking about it, I will immediately gain it back, right? And it's
Hmm.
because you can't just decide I'm gonna. How do you lose weight, right? It's a quick question. Well, there's exercise, there's diet, there is sleeping well on time. There is
Yeah.
you can't do all of them together at the same time. You have to first decide which of those do you take on. Hey,
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
gonna wake up a little bit early and go exercise, and I will just work on that, and then you build the
Yeah.
next atomic habit. So that's that way. I really like that. So it translates really well. But other than
Yeah.
that, I'll still read a lot of science fiction. I'll still read,
Hmm.
so both of them. So work and fun.
Terrific. A bucket list race in the horizon for you?
Bucket list race. I would love to go up to Colorado or Utah and do one of those big mountain bikes.
Hmm.
Not mountain biking races. I mean mountain road races. Right.
Hmm.
So we were at Rocky Mountain National Park a couple of months ago, last month actually, July, and it was great. We went camping, everything, and one day the kids wanted to go whitewater rafting, and Polly and the kids love whitewater rafting. I'm
Hmm.
not a big fan. Anything which is, so I don't like downhill skiing. I don't like amusement park rides. Anything where I'm not in control
Yeah.
probably is not my cup of tea. So we decided, you guys go do whitewater rafting. I'm gonna rent a road bike, and I rented a road
Hmm.
bike, and I went up a mountain. Wasn't very big. I went to a 20-mile ride, kicked my ass
Hmm.
properly. But I'd like to go spend some time and get one of those out. If I could
Yeah.
get to Europe with my bike, which is the next thing, do some of the Tour de France routes. Just
Hmm.
Alpe
Hmm.
d'Huez is one of my favorite rides. If I could go do that in person, I've done that on Zwift, but to be able to do that, that would be great. Running wise, I think what we will end up doing some point, Polly and I have to figure out, have to do the circuit. Marine Corps,
Yeah,
Chicago, London. Hopefully, back in India, go back and do at least either the Chennai Marathon or the Bangalore. There's just so much cool stuff there. So one
yeah,
of
yeah.
those.
Well, you have a long list of
I have a long list.
bucket list. I asked for one,
But
but you gave me almost
hey,
15 of them.
you know what?
It's a
You
big
have to
bucket.
have. You have to have these milestones.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right. The last one I have is if you made a movie of your life, what genre would you put that in, and who would you hire to play your character?
What genre would I put that in? I don't know. That's a really good question, man. It's not drama. I'll tell you that because I like to keep that low, right? It's not. Well, let's see. What would you put it on? It's a sports movie. That's what it is. It's not an action movie. It's really
Adventure.
just basically adventure. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
It is adventure. Who would I like to play that role? How about Milan Soman? Isn't he an
All right.
Ironman? Yeah.
He is. He is. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there you
Yeah,
go.
that's a good
That's a
choice.
good
Good
character. Yeah,
choice.
that's what
When
we.
so many scripts on its way, I think that could be a big break for your career.
Ah,
All right.
all right.
Awesome. Great. You did well on that Q&A. Learned a few more things about you, Tarun. Coming to a wrap up here, I
Sure.
want to give you the last word. Any final message you want to send to our listeners?
You know, like I think one thing that I really focus on, like I like to say, is that change is the only constant we have in life, right?
Mm,
So don't stagnate. Don't just settle. It's easy to settle. I see a lot, and I see there's a lot of desis in particular suffer from this.
mm, mm,
We take ourselves as a point in time. Oh, I
mm,
have bad knees, so I can't do this.
mm,
Uh, I see people with no legs doing Ironman. Okay, so there is a
mm,
big gap between what we can and can't do. We have to mentally get over. Okay, so I have a bad knee. How do I work around it? Right.
mm,
That's the mentality that I would like everybody to approach because it's otherwise you're going to be victim of the life. You can't let life drive you. You have to drive life. That's the biggest thing
mm,
that you have to take control of. That yes, there's a lot I can still do with what I've
mm.
been given.
Yeah.
I guess that's my final parting thought, if you will.
Yeah, great. That's a wonderful thought. Absolutely. Change is only a constant. Great reminder and a powerful message. Tarun, thanks for sharing your journey here. I enjoyed it. I took away quite a bit of tips in what you learned. Um, let you go enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Tarun. Bye.
Cheers.